Bună dimineața, stimați reprezentanți ai mass media. Vă mulțumim pentru participarea dumneavoastră la briefingul anual al Excelenței sale, ambasadorului extraordinar și plenipotențiar al Federației Ruse în România, domnul Valery Kuzmin, cu ocazia Zilei Diplomatului Rus, care va fi marcată pe data de 10 februarie. Vă mulțumim frumos pentru atenție și îi dăm cuvântul Excelenței sale, ambasadorului Rusiei în România, domnului Valery Kuzmin.
Good morning, dear colleagues, dear friends. Bună dimineața, dragi prieteni. As our chief of protocol has already announced, our today's briefing is devoted to the professional day of Russian diplomatic service, which regularly is remembered on the 10th of February. According to already established tradition, we would try to make some summarizing analysis, brief analysis, of course, of problems and achievements of Russian diplomatic service and challenges of international situation, which become more and more dangerous, alarming, if you like, recently due to a number of reasons. In 2023, Russian diplomatic service pursued a foreign policy determined by President Vladimir Putin in a situation of heightened confrontation with the collective West. And the collective West, we understand member states of G7, NATO, and some group of other nations all over the world, which are maintaining in spirit of solidarity certain course in the international on the international arena, which is evidently opposed to the major trends and if you like point of view position of the majority of members of the United Nations, which has got another informal nickname like the collective West. It is not formal. It is just a description of the situation. The same opposing camp is denominated by the nickname global majority. The main goals of Russian diplomacy were to provide political and diplomatic support for the special military operation in Ukraine and to expand cooperation with the countries and associations that make up the global majority. An important milestone in 2023 was the update of the doctrine underlying Russia's foreign policy. On March 31st, the President of Russia approved new version of foreign policy concept of the Russian Federation. The document expressed a commitment to promote the formation of a more just and sustainable international system based on the principles of international law and cooperation between the states. In particular, which is worth mentioning, to Russian Federation, it was given a definition of state civilization. That means that modern Russia, historical Russia, proved to be a specific civilization within the human history. Integration with Belarus has advanced significantly in this time. The partner countries began working on the Interstate Treaty on Security Guarantees and the Union State Security Concept. The guidelines for implementing the provisions of the treaty establishing the Union State for the period of 2024-2026 were agreed upon. Amid geopolitical turbulence, Euro-Asian integration associations that include Russia have successfully demonstrated their resilience. The Collective Security Treaty Organization member states, which share approaches to regional security in Eurasia, the situation in Afghanistan, and the prevention of an arms race in outer space, expressed their positions in joint statements of the country's foreign ministers. A legal framework was established for the CSTO to participate in UN peacekeeping activities. Under the Belarusian chairmanship, the CSTO began discussing the Euro-Asian security architecture agenda at a high-level international conference in Minsk last October. Interaction in the Commonwealth of Independent States was highly productive. At the CIS summit in Bishkek in October, the members adopted a statement on international relations in a multipolar world and signed an agreement on free trade in services and on investment activities. The CIS Human Rights Commission and the Commission of Ombudsmen for Children's Rights in the CIS member states commenced their work. The Treaty on the Establishment of the International Organization for the Russian Language was signed. Russian-Chinese relationship reached unprecedented level in 2023. After his re-election as President of the People's Republic of China, Chairman Xi Jinping made his first foreign visit to Russia in March. President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, visited China to take part in the third Belt and Road International Forum in October. Bilateral trade between two countries again reached a record high of over $230 billion. The share of the ruble and yuan in mutual transactions reached about 80%. That means that dollars are used only to give you more clear understanding, more clear vision, how much is it. The Russia-China tandem played a stabilizing role in the world, on the world stage, making a significant contribution to the democratization of the entire system of international relations. Russia maintained an intensive political dialogue with India, including in the context of the country's chairmanship in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the G20, reinforcing the Russian-Indian special and privileged strategic partnership. The bilateral trade exceeded $54 billion. As well, national currencies are widely used in this trade. Important joint steps were taken to expand Russian-Iranian relations. In particular, the parties signed an agreement on the construction of the Rasht-Ostara railway in May. That is one of the key parts of the south-north or north-south transportation corridor. The parties signed an agreement on the construction of Rasht-Ostara railway in May, and the foreign ministers signed a declaration on the ways and means to counter, mitigate, and redress the adverse impacts of unilateral coercive measures in December. Relations with Turkey, if I'm, excuse my English or excuse my French if you like, if I'm not so right with pronunciation, reached a strategic level in the field of peaceful nuclear energy. In particular, Russia began supplying nuclear fuel for the Akuyu nuclear power plant. Russia gained a stronger foothold in the Middle East. Relations with the countries of the Gulf Cooperation Council, primarily the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, acquired a new quality, including with regard to the stabilization of the global oil market through OPEC Plus, which is now well known structure for cooperation in this field. There was progress in relations with the League of the Arab States, For example, Morocco hosted the sixth session of the Russian Arab Cooperation Forum of Foreign Ministers last December. The second Russia-Africa Summit, held in St. Petersburg in July, marked the culmination of collaborative efforts to significantly enhance ties in this promising area of Russia's foreign policy. The agreements reached at the highest level set the priorities for long-term cooperation with African countries and associations. The expansion of traditional partnerships with countries in Latin America and the Caribbean was central to the agenda of the successful political dialogue with regional states at the highest and high levels. A significant milestone was the Russia-Latin America International Parliamentary Conference held in Moscow in October. The joint statement of the ASEAN and Russian foreign ministers on the occasion of the fifth anniversary of their strategic partnership reflected Russia's strong ties with the Association of the Southeast Asian Nations. A pivotal moment in the development of BRICS was the decision made at the Johannesburg summit in August to expand the association from January the 1st of this year by inviting Argentina, Egypt, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Ethiopia as new members of the association. Starting from the 1st of January, Russia exercises the functions of BRICS presidency, the agenda of which includes about 200 events, including numerous sectorial activities, summit in Kazan next October, and even BRICS Games. The motto of Russian presidency is strengthening or consolidating the multilateralism for the sake of just global development and security. The influence of Shanghai Cooperation Organization on global and Eurasian processes increased in 2023. Iran became a full member of CSO, and the process for Belarus to become a member was initiated. In its relations with unfriendly states, Russia took steps to debunk the concept of a rules-based international order promoted by the United States and the European Union. At the UN, the OSCE, and other multilateral platforms, Russia advocated for the peaceful development of all states based on the principles of sovereign equality and indivisible security. Russia effectively thwarted plans for its international isolation while maintaining opportunities for dialogue and pragmatic cooperation with the West on the basis of equality and respect for each other's interests. In light of the United States' openly anti-Russian policy and inability to negotiate, NATO and the EU continued eastward expansion and the creation of new threats to Russia's security. Russia suspended its participation in the Treaty on Measures for Further Reduction and Limitation of Strategic Offensive Arms, so-called New START, in February. We also terminated our participation in the Treaty on Conventional Armed Forces in Europe, SFE, in November, and withdrew the ratification of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, CTBT, in November. Russia withdrew from the Barents Euro-Arctic Council in September in response to the Western countries' actions that effectively paralyzed the Council's activities and a lack of confirmation from them that they are ready to transfer the chairmanship to Russia. In July, Russia also suspended its participation in the Black Sea Initiative for the export of Ukrainian food products due to a lack of progress in the implementation of UN-Russia memorandum on the normalization of the exports of Russian agricultural goods and fertilizers. An important milestone in the humanitarian sphere was establishment of the International Russophile, in Russian Russophile it could be pronounced differently, which is united by common sympathy for Russia and interest in Russian culture and language, which happened in March. The quota for foreign citizens to study at Russian universities with governmental grants was increased up to the 30,000 places or grants. Additionally, 206,000 books and textbooks in Russian were donated to educational institutions in 23 countries. A World Conference on Traditional Values, November, 5 regional and more than 70 country conferences and other events were held as part of cooperation with the movement of Russian compatriots, in the terms used in Romania with Russian diaspora. The system for issuing unified electronic visas for citizens of 55 countries to enter Russia was launched in August, and more than 120,000 people have already used it during those 5 months. Summing up, the Russian Federation is no way isolated on the international arena. Together with a group of dynamically developing countries of global majority, in the first place BRICS, but not only them, it actively promotes gradual transfer to a new multipolar international order based on sovereign equality, mutual respect of legitimate national interests of every state, integral and indivisible security, collective, or sometimes they call it network approach, to working out answers to major existential global challenges, starting from international terrorism, human trafficking, including for the purposes of black transplantology, like it we're eyewitnessing in Ukraine, organized trans-border crime and drug trade, global warming, safeguarding the environment, and so on and so forth. The Russian Federation's appeal for to putting an end to neo-colonial practices of the outgoing hegemon, the United States, and its G7 and NATO allies, receives wider and wider response all over the world. We enjoy solidarity and support of the global majority. Russian economy is in no way suffocated by the illegitimate Western sanctions. GDP growth is expected in the proximity of 4% for the 2023. Industrial production growth has exceeded 14%. Volume of trade with People's Republics of China, India, Turkey, and many other partners grows at accelerated pace. Russian society has got more consolidated at the backdrop of the SMO, Special Military Operation in Ukraine, which perfectly corresponds with the principle of the international law enshrined in the United Nations Charter, primarily rights for self-defense and for national self-determination. We are resolutely going to fight for complete eradication of Nazism and racism, neocolonialism and imperialism, for legitimate interests of our national security, sovereignty, freedom, and territorial integrity of our beloved fatherland. Before going for the section devoted to the bilateral relations, I would like to say that I hope that those who were asking questions about what Russian diplomacy was doing last year or the previous year, you have got in major features the answer to this question. The elaboration of this question could be presented when we are trying to access the question of possibility or improbability of consolidating of the security architecture in Europe without Russia. Evidently, in spite of those very deep divisions that were initiated by the collective West on European continent, the issue of pan-European security remains very important and enjoys in all the situations of the diplomatic work our constant attention. And without participation of Russia, no European security architecture could be imaginable for so many reasons, from purely territorial, geographic, to following the geostrategic and military aspects of this challenge, which is a real challenge of our days in the European continent. And in on some other subjects, I will touch upon different aspects of this issue, because not only continental players, not only continental actors are involved in the process of providing desirably consolidating security and strategic stability in Europe. We will touch upon those aspects a little bit later. Moving to bilateral Russian-Romanian relations. Due to its constant Euro-Atlantic solidarity course, the official Bucharest has supported all illegitimate, from the standpoint of international law, anti-Russian sanctions, and firmly occupied a position on the list of unfriendly states, which since the spring 2022 is maintained by the Russian government, the list of those states, according to the presidential decree. Bilateral political and diplomatic dialogue has been effectively frozen by the Romanian side. Last year, it was frozen indeed before that, since February 2022. Last year was marked by a cunning decision to suspend in 6 months, that meant by the end of August, operation of Russian Center for Science and Culture in Bucharest, for openly far-fetched reasons like promoting falsification of history. I can bring my own evidence that it is a fake pretext. But patience failed our former partners, and as early as the beginning of June, the quotas for diplomatic and administrative and technical personnel were drastically cut down almost 3 and 4 times respectively. As a result, not only the above-mentioned center, but the embassy's secondary school, which would celebrate its 70th birthday on September the 1st, 2023, but it didn't happen, including even position of doctor of the embassy, had to be closed by July the 1st. The only positive moment that could be remembered in this connection is the indignation of a considerable segment of Romanian public, and in the first place, Russian speakers, our compatriots, with the fact of their deliberate deprivation of the opportunities and democratic right to enjoy the treasures of Russian art and culture, and substantial curtailing traditional humanitarian relations with the historical motherland. Through the year, we have more than once tried to attract the attention of the Romanian authorities to inadmissibility of the protracted assistance of the military efforts of the criminal neo-Nazi regime in Kiev. This topic has nothing to do with the humanitarian aid to its victims of that regime. In particular, refugees forced to flee away from rampant corruption and Bandera-style terror of the authorities, religious persecution, and mobilization to senseless bloody war against their recent compatriots who had made their free option in favor of reunification with Russia. In particular, our efforts were directed to warn Romanian authorities that eventual use of American-made combat planes from Romanian territory after their deployment and in future military operations, those planes are expected to be handed to Kiev soon. Very recently, they appeared news that some of them already are deployed in Ukraine. And as far as they would be used against the Russian population and armed forces, this fact would be considered in Moscow as a direct involvement in Ukrainian conflict. The focus of our work has been to bring to the scrutiny of Romanian public true information on the Russian foreign policy, function which is provided for in the Vienna Convention on the Diplomatic Relations from 1961 as a legitimate function of any diplomatic mission. It appeared to be very tough for NATO mentality indoctrinated people to digest the fact that our country doesn't wage any aggressive war against Ukraine or Ukrainians as a nation, but against criminal neo-Nazi regime in Kiev. As one, but not the least consequence of this consistent policy, we never shell or bomb civilian targets, even despite routine practice of the Ukrainian neo-Nazis to use civilian infrastructure and population as human shield. Nevertheless, at least 3 times during 2023, Romanian Ministry for Foreign Affairs, at the request of the Ministry of Defense, presented to the embassy resolute protests under the pretext of alleged Russian type or Russian model drones or their splinter parts uncontrolled fall on the Romanian territory during the attacks of allegedly Ukrainian civilian port infrastructure in the Danube Delta. I have no need to comment it, but to say that never any conclusive evidence was presented to us. In this context, it could be relevant to remember a similar démarche of about 4 or 5 years ago, when Romanian authorities insisted that a Russian naval ship breached Romanian territorial waters. Neither my demand to inform about exact geographic location of that incident, nor further official proposal of our defense ministry to hold consultations with the aim of avoiding eventual incidents of such kind in future have ever been answered. Reliable information of the total annual volume of bilateral trade between our 2 countries is not available yet. According to some Romanian data, Romanian exports slightly exceeds 200 million, and the Romanian imports slightly exceeds $290 million, which is, compared to the last year, evidently is a big drop. Last year, the figures were in the roundabouts of $3.6, $3.7 billion. Thus, some arch strategists in Bucharest could triumphantly report that they have made their country finally independent from cheaper and, as a result, more compatible gas, oil, fertilizers, chemicals, and so on. In the meantime, Romanian industrial production continues to shrink, minus 4.8% January-November year to year. Due to high electricity tariffs, some enterprises had to cut down or even temporarily suspend production. And average indexes of consumer goods inflation have risen to 10.4% year to year, although it is not a record, of course, for EU member states. Congratulations. Despite ongoing brainwashing carried out by NATO mainstream social and mass media that in fact encourages genuine witch hunt for Kremlin agents, the number of Romanian citizens who presented their applications for grants to study in Russian universities and at some courses of Russian language has exceeded our expectations. So we asked to increase this number, and got positive feedback from Moscow. An important milestone in the humanitarian sphere last year was the establishment of the international Russophile movement, which I have already mentioned. And what is really positive that should be remembered in this regard, that among the founders of that movement was a Romanian citizen, the leader of an NGO, who participated in foundation of this movement in the spirit of traditionally friendly relations and mutual empathy between our peoples. The system for issuing electronic visas to visit Russia, mentioned as well before, is open for the Romanian citizens, in spite of Romanians present on that list of unfriendly states, for the better knowledge of our audience. And I can tell that some of the Romanian citizens have already taken decisions and enjoyed the services of this. Посмотри. Вон, see. Okay. Now moving to the questions, I would like to make a couple of remarks. Some of them are very, really very good questions, quite to the point of problems and challenges that we are facing. But I would like you to bear in mind that I'm not in the position to answer some of them because I'm Russian, not American ambassador, and I follow the rules of the diplomatic communication. A number of questions was devoted, as I've mentioned, to the role of Russian diplomatic service. I tried to make more or less comprehensive coverage, though it is inevitably remaining brief because activities encompassed so many international platforms, not only United Nations, but this year even the OSCE annual foreign ministers session was richer with its more significance because of direct participation of our minister. And many other topics, they deserve being mentioned, but of course you understand that it is impossible to cover everything and even the most important events and trends in this field. But nevertheless, I would like to answer to certain questions, mentioning only one after another, after a comma, those who ask those questions. The first set of questions was presented by News.ro and in Prima Linea, and is dealing with the increasing risk of war between NATO and Russia, and in particular, more and more numerous declaration of NATO political and military leaders on this topic. To my mind, every incumbent Western politician, prominent military commander, member of European Parliament, and so on, would like to find after retirement or end of one's mandate a well-paid, untroubled retirement position, somewhere in the headquarters of a military-industrial corporation, different foundations, think tanks, or analytic centers for strategic studies. In recent years, G7 member states, not to speak about other not so well-to-do countries of the collective West, are facing growing existential challenges for the economic and social development, agricultural security, environmental, and even moral, religious, ethic norms having formed the basis of their societies for decades and centuries. The ruling Western elite, or if you like, you can remember deep state in the United States or oligarchy, whether it is national or international oligarchy, has found itself in a drastic need for effective solutions of all those problems and challenges, all those discrepancies and disbalances that immediately threaten their old style of governing through imposing on the world as a whole their own majorly neo-colonialist rules. Nowadays, when the West faces more and more resolute resistance from Russia and global majority of humankind against their coercive domination, they do not care about pulling out of the dusty archives the old scarecrow of Russian threat, which 3 or 4 decades ago was called Soviet or communist threat, to their civilized or progressive or democratic Western neo-imperialist community. Unfortunately, for our beautiful blue planet, these above-mentioned Western, and in the first place, American ruling elites have at their disposal enormous nuclear arsenals which are able to destroy all our world. And even more unfortunate for themselves is the fact that Russia has at its disposal deterrence potential, which allows it to respond quite effectively to any nuclear blackmail. Their major miscalculation is hidden in their belief that unleashing and escalating the hybrid war against Russia and Ukraine or by other means, they will go unpunished until at least a strategic defeat of Russia on the battlefield, but preferably splitting Russian Federation into submissive minor territorial entities. Bearing in mind the above, I have only to remind you that more than once our President Vladimir Putin warned the collective West that if they would like to have our world without Russia, we, the Russians, do not need of such a world at all. That's why all the alarmist statements of Western politicians and military people made up to now should be regarded as, first of all, justification of the growth of military expenditures and production of new, more and more sophisticated and dreadful weapons. In fact, diverting badly needed investment from the civilian economy, social welfare, food security, and so on, as efforts to mislead public opinion in their countries about true sources of military threat, including such a menace which is formulated as the Third World War. Though some progressive analysts and political scientists, they already claim that this war is going on, only in specific forms. Third World War, which could happen only resulting from the Western brinkmanship imperialist policy, officially providing for the first or preemptive nuclear or even conventional. Sometimes they use different definitions like high precision disarming, conventional strikes, and so on, blows, and so on and so forth, against its geopolitical adversaries or enemies. And then the third position is psychological preparation of the Western public opinion, first of all, for starting a war against Russia. This is my analysis of all those statements. On behalf of the Russian Federation, I am authorized to responsibly say that our military doctrine doesn't provide for first or preemptive strikes, but we obtain sufficient nuclear potential to respond to any such Western aggressions. As well, taking advantage of our current superiority in some strategic, nuclear, and hypersonic conventional weapons. Next question, which was put to me by even more participants of our briefing. In прямой линии, V-blogger, Вождь Ruse. It deals with the NATO maneuver Steadfast Defender 2024. The first, what is it? First action of which, or first event of which would start, or maybe has already started in the Romanian territory. Today we have the 7th of February, so it has already started. At least it was announced in the press. For the period from February the 5th till May the 5th, in the Polish territory, local Polish aviation authorities issued the notification for pilots. It is available, it's a number, number 604/2024, a fresh one, about possibility of military operations covering the territory to the depth of a few hundred kilometers from the borders of Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine. It, as I mentioned, it is valid for the period between February the 5th, exactly the date of starting some military artillery exercising on Romanian territory. And this is dealing with Polish territory. We are dealing with Polish territory. Though I am not informed about all the details and aspects of this very notification, but nevertheless, evidently, it is directly connected with the unprecedented, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, NATO military exercises under the title Steadfast Defender 2024. In the framework of these maneuvers, deployment of up to 100,000 troops, it is declared number. God knows what would be the final figure, along the western borders of Russian Federation is planned. A good part of that really big, for the peaceful time, of course, contingent will come from the United States of America. That is from beyond the ocean. In the same time, NATO and EU hastily try to revitalize the program of military Schengen. There is a particular question of one of you on this issue, which to my mind is the program of improving majorly in Central and Eastern Europe. I haven't heard anything about military Schengen in Spain or somewhere in Italy. Maybe I'm wrong, of course. To facilitate rapid transportation and deployment of the North Atlantic Alliance forces towards the borders of Russia. We have heard many misleading explanations and justifications of these increased military activities in the proximity of our national borders. But the most simple and persuasive answer from Moscow is, what would be the reaction of the USA if similar military exercises would be organized by Russia and a number of friendly states, say on the Mexican border? In this definite context, I'm not going to tease Americans for having been unable for the time being to put their southern border under proper control in face of the challenges of massive illegal immigration and drug trafficking. From the point of view of Russian legitimate national security concerns, all those activities look like preparation for an invasion. And evidently, Moscow can't afford to idly observe these dangerous movements and preparations, in particular at the backdrop of constant efforts of Washington, followed by its European allies, to escalate hostilities and bloodshed in Ukraine, as well as consistent acts of mass terrorism against civilian population on the territory of Russia. In view of the above observations and conclusions, drawn from the practical behavior of the NATO states in its eastern flank, of the NATO alliance and its eastern flank, we can retrospectively better see the true aims of the alliance when at summit in 2008 in Bucharest gave green light to the future Ukrainian membership in NATO. Whatever else would say our Western counterparts, as a Russian proverb insists, the facts are a stubborn thing. Indeed, in this light, we see all the rhetoric that the chief European diplomat, Josep Borrell, is so famous for. Well, whether it was about European garden, meaning EU, or the jungles, meaning the rest of the world outside the collective West, or of course the recent classic phrase about need to get ready for a war if somebody is looking for peace. It was the logic of the last wisdom that Russian leadership, I mean that being interested in peace, you should get ready for a war. Guided by this logic of this wisdom, Russian leadership has had to follow in its defense strategy. Since at least the famous Munich Conference on International Security speech of President Putin in as early as 2007, and which was fundamentally misinterpreted by collective West, which as a response, as far as we understand, initiated stage by stage escalation of confrontation between us. We believe that at least since that moment, we had enough evidence to understand the genuine intentions of the collective West, which are now openly formulated, and I have mentioned those formulations, as strategic defeat of Russia, weakening of Russia, even splitting up of Russia. Another set of questions presented by News.ro, Pro TV, and vblogger on Moldova, in particular on eventuality of Russian aggression. I have followed with much curiosity the storm and a glass of water that happened after a protracted interview of Romanian Chief of General Staff, Georgița, if I'm not mistaken with pronunciation, Vlad. We will touch upon this particular interview a little bit later. But let me leave for the Romanians to scrutinize the interview from their domestic standpoint. As for your direct question about my opinion on this assertion that after eventual Russian victory in Ukraine, the following assertion, after the eventual Russian victory in Ukraine, Russia would choose as its next target Moldova, Republic of Moldova. I would like to bring to your attention a number of very relevant stories. The first tells us that recently the Czech Republic General Staff studied the geopolitical strategic situation and came to a conclusion that it is necessary to start preparation for a war between NATO and Russia, which most probably will be launched in Suwalki corridor. May you have heard this geographic name, maybe not. It is a corridor, terrestrial corridor, which divides the territory of Belarus, the allied state with Russia, from the Kaliningrad exclave of Russian Federation on the Baltic. Some time ago, in Polish General Staff, they tried to imitate, to make a kind of a computer game imitation of attack on Russian Kaliningrad exclave. And computers gave them a disastrously disappointed result. Polish capital Warsaw would fall in approximately 5 days. I remember it exactly. It was reported in Russian and international mass media. Furthermore, in Tallinn, capital of Estonia, Vilnius, capital of Lithuania, Helsinki, capital of Finland, not only the military, but civilian politicians, if not every night, but sometimes even in a daytime, and very often are scared and express their fear. They are scared by cauchemars, nightmares of Russian intervention into their territories directly and immediately. So it is for you to choose what scenario you would like to choose and make comparison with the assertions of numerous Moldovan leading bureaucrats and politicians nowadays. Of course, I've made a try to joke, but indeed the menace, most immediate threat, according to the last Vilnius NATO summit of Russian invasion, is pursuing the sick imagination of many Western politicians and military leaders. To the contrary, no Russian leading official who is authorized to make foreign policy statements. I'm not speaking about radicals who exist in every society, in every country, all over the world. Never, and in no way, President Vladimir Putin had ever threatened with or even made a hint about intention to unleash a war against NATO. The explanation is very simple. Russia has no need for such a war. We have never initiated, since imperial times, through Soviet Union times, never initiated aggressive wars against the West. Don't remind me about winter war with Finland. I will crush all your arguments immediately. It was on the eve of the Second World War. Russia is the largest country on the earth by its territory, by its own enormous natural resources, including now fashionable and badly needed everywhere, so-called rare earth metals, important for produce of microchips and other electronic equipment. For decades and centuries, our country showed and confirmed its readiness and responsible will for maintaining mutually beneficial trade with the rest of the world. It was not us, but the West that created and massively supports neo-Nazi regime in Kiev and attempt to use it as a destructive weapon against Russia. Thus, all those Western politicians and military commanders are making two substantial mistakes. One is mentioned above, has been already mentioned above. Russia has no need in aggression, against NATO. And the second, but not the least important, is that they are proceeding from naive conviction, if not a cunning lie, that aggression against Russia, which is now openly being prepared by the West, would go majorly as a proxy conventional war. If it comes to the vital national security threats, including threats to our statehood, territorial integrity, and so on, it is all provided in our open doctrines, defense doctrine, foreign policy doctrine. Russian Federation keeps, for such cases, for such eventuality, its nuclear triad in the state of high alert. Another question related to Moldova from Newsroom on appointment of new Moldovan foreign minister. This question should be addressed to the top authorities in Chisinau. By what motives they were guided appointing notorious politician to the post of foreign minister? They were seeking for more problems and complications, or they were aiming, or they were wishing to reestablish traditional pragmatic economic cooperation and make healthier the atmosphere of bilateral relations. As for allegations of a newly assigned chief of Moldovan diplomacy and his bosses about hybrid war allegedly waged, or hybrid threats allegedly addressed to Moldova by Moscow, the only reasonable and acceptable opinion to my mind is nothing more than the feverish delirium of those obsessed with the idea of weakening and splitting up Russia and a loyalist attempt to please outgoing hegemon. I like this formulation. I don't know what would be your opinion. Though, of course, we can resort to Russian English proverb. We'll live, we'll see, or to the Gospel of Matthew. They will be judged by the fruits of their deeds. Next group of questions from Pro TV and then Prima Linie on Ukraine. I put them all together because it is rather difficult. It needs much more time that allows my regular graphic to present an answer, full answer to every question, and they will overlap one another. So, about perspective of an end for the war. Russian President Putin, our foreign minister, defense minister, more than once officially declared that the special military operation would continue till its goals are achieved. Those goals are providing, including physical security for civilian population of newly incorporated and all the rest Russian regions from barbaric terrorist attacks of the neo-Nazi Kiev regime. I believe that quite recently you had a number of illustrations of those barbaric attacks, which are deliberately aiming civilian population, marketplaces, bakeries, bus stops, and so on and so forth. Bearing in mind that all targeting hard job is carried out by American intelligence and other sometimes Western intelligence services, we can't believe that those shellings, systematic, continuing, deliberate shellings, including such a tactic when launching a couple of missiles on the marketplace, they wait for 20 minutes. When emergency services, ambulances collect there to try to help the victims and injured people, and make another strike. In another 20 minutes, they wait and then make the third strike. If you tell me that it is just coincidence, or I don't know, unhappy occasion, or anything else of this kind, I won't believe you. And it is useless to change my mind in this regard. Unfortunately, in the countries of the collective West, they do not want to recognize the fact that those massive terrorist attacks and practices started not today, not even on 24th of February 2022, but they started from the spring 2014 after bloody Maidan coup d'etat in Ukraine, when it was an illegitimate regime established in this country, which later, even before presidential elections, announced so-called anti-terrorist operation against the civilian population of Donbass. And those crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity, all kind of barbaric, I would say, bloodshed and atrocities committed by the Ukrainian radical nationalists, whom we are now quite confidently and consciously call neo-Nazis. They are still being investigated by our Federal Investigative Committee. And in some cases, even verdicts have been already announced in absentia, and sometimes we find those criminals among the prisoners of war. And nobody will go unpunished for those crimes and atrocities, believe me. The second goal is demilitarization of Ukraine. As far as NATO hasn't dropped its plans to use the territory of this country as a spearhead platform to pose strategic threat to Russian national security. It is too early to speak about definite delineation of those borders, lines, frontiers. But the basic principle was specified by President Putin recently when he said that exact location of future demarcation line should guarantee Russian territory from any terrorist assault, whether artillery or missile, which we have just discussed and remembered during our briefing. The third goal is denazification of Ukraine, because without it, nobody could guarantee final and definite elimination of the threats to national security of Russian Federation from the territory of this country. Because unfortunately, the story is much longer even than bloody Maidan coup d'etat, which I have mentioned today, of 2014. The story started at least during the Second World War, but in fact, even much earlier, when radical nationalist Russophobic movement was cherished and brought up by the anti-Russian geopolitical rivals to fight our country. And after the Second World War, it got I would say, disgusting forms of treason, because our recent allies in anti-Nazi Germany and militaristic Japan coalition, Western countries, hosted and I would say encouraged those former Nazi collaborationists who managed to flee away from Europe after the defeat of Nazis in their countries, like in the United States, in Canada in particular. The goals that I mentioned above stay in full conformity with the modern international law and are rooted in the final judgment of the Nuremberg Tribunal condemning Nazi German leaders as war criminals. Another question was devoted to visit of Victoria Nuland. Frankly, I'm not fascinated at all with the following of intrigues and studying plots and scandals and Kiev Nazi junta. The most recent information coming from Washington says that the White House has no objections against sacking of the Armed Forces Commander-in-Chief, if I'm not mistaken, Valery Zaluzhny. Though the main troublemaker, drug president Vladimir Zelensky, after a few attacks against Zaluzhny, started to mumble something about the need for general reshuffle, reset. We remember notorious reset offered by Barack Obama's administration in Russian-American relations in the time of Hillary Clinton's state secretariat. So, of both civilian and top administration. That means Zelensky is maneuvering. There are many contradictions, quarrels, and problems between them. What is really important to my mind is to remember that the former stand-up clone had resolutely insisted on prolongation of the state of martial law and mobilization. That means that on this ground, or better to say, under this pretext, presidential elections of Ukraine have been already definitely cancelled and delayed for indefinite period of time, till the end of the hostilities. As a result, starting from March 21st, if I'm not mistaken, or around this date, Mr. Zelensky becomes more than a lame duck. He would be indeed a president without legally valid people's mandate. What was the exact mission of Victoria Nuland, who back in December 2013 rightfully deserved the honorary title of Bloody Maidan coup mother, is not important, if but for a historical record, to my mind. Evidently, she was urgently dispatched to Kiev to prevent unexpected and immediate collapse of the pro-American ruling clique, formerly as a result of scandalous shooting down of Russian Ilyushin 76 cargo plane that carried 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war for previously planned and established to be coordinated with Kiev authorities exchange of detained persons. What is worth mentioning in this context, that Russian investigative committee, which could be compared to a certain extent to FBI in the United States, so for better understanding, has already recovered conclusive evidence that a plane was shot down by two American-made and regularly American-operated Patriot missiles, because very respectful experts in the West, military experts, they say that the team to operate Patriot anti-air missile system is about 90 members, to prepare, to train, and to make such a team experienced enough to shoot a very distant target in the depths of the territory of Russian Federation. They wonder and they doubt that it was really a Ukrainian team that operated such such shot of missiles this time. In the first hours, in the state of frustration, Zelensky angrily demanded international investigation of the incident. By now, it looks like he has swollen his tongue, but it is not correct. He is continuing to lie and to disseminate fakes. So, nevertheless, Russian President Vladimir Putin publicly announced that we insist on such investigation. But to the best of my knowledge, the Russian side hasn't yet received any adequate response from any international headquarters, NGOs, human rights fighters, I don't know whom. Nobody is interested in this investigation. So, an evident and documented massive terrorist act of Kiev risks to share the fate of mysterious and uninvestigated for more than a year by now blowing up of the Nord Stream gas pipelines in the Baltics. Looks very suspicious. And in the logic of classical detective story, it could bring us to a conclusion that one and the same interested party is behind to these catastrophic, I would say, incidents. Pleasant right to make the final guess, pleasure to make the final guess or conclusion, I leave for legendary free Western mass media. For relevant references, look for publications of Pulitzer Prize laureate Seymour Hersh. They are available on the internet. On bilateral relations, there is a number of questions. They are good by their good intentions, but I already mentioned that I am not in a position as a Russian ambassador to answer some of them. But the first is dealing with my last year's remarks, characterizing and evaluating the state of our bilateral relations in general. I am really a little bit surprised that somebody still keep calculating Romanian rating in the race for that title to be more correct than others. In particular, when I hear declarations, for example, of prominent politicians that how can we tolerate it? Not a single Russian spy has been arrested in Romania like in all other NATO countries. I believe that followed exactly by these similar motives, that in the meantime, since last year's briefing, Bucharest has achieved a substantial negative progress using the newspeak of Western statistics in this field. I have already elaborated our view on this topic in my review of our bilateral relations. By the way, before the last year, and even before the beginning of the special military operation in 2022, I had been summoned to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Romania quite a lot. Not once or twice, for sure. Another question, which was asked by vblogger, asking for my eventual advice to a reasonable Romanian who do not want to find oneself in the epicenter of a big war. Don't know vblogger. It is very to the point to ask this question. If we are really concerned with the potential dangers of NATO-Russia military escalation. But as a Russian ambassador, not American, I repeat it, I reiterate it, I'm not in a position to give such advice. Nevertheless, just a few days ago, Romanian mass media printed a piece of news about press conference of the initiative committee proposing to replace in the constitution the term spouses with the phrase a man and a woman, and introduce into the fundamental law the right to use cash in any transactions. Remembering the fate of failed referendum to correct respective definition of family, if I'm not mistaken, in spring 2019. Still, the above initiative looks better than nothing, though in the current situation of rapid expansion of the totalitarian democracy practices, this is in brackets, totalitarian democracy practices, in the countries of the collective West, there is no guarantee of final success for such tactics. For the sake of saving your time, I hope you will excuse me for not elaborating my interpretation of the term totalitarian democracy, which is quite applicable to the most members of the collective West, and which I oppose to the Washington's cunning division of the international community into two camps, like it was 30, 40 years ago already. Another hint to that strange phenomena. Into two camps, democracies and totalitarian regimes. Just look around yourself. Another question. We blogger in Prima Linea News Raw about the ways of restoration of normal relations, development of trade, putting an end to Russophobic and anti-Russian official campaign. It is the question of the same character. Answering similar questions, our Foreign Minister Lavrov is fond of saying that tango takes two. Normal interstate relations and mutually profitable, beneficial trade have been substantially undermined and in certain sectors completely blocked and uprooted by the Romanian side. That means that the burden of resumption of traditionally good relations falls majorly on the shoulders of the official Bucharest. What is the share of responsibility of European Union or NATO, Brussels headquarters or Washington Party Committee? Let us have inside the brackets, as far as we keep it inside the brackets, as far as we have quite different stories, even among the different NATO member states. I'm not going to remind you of the names, but you know them. Nevertheless, I would like to turn to the most recent news available to me from a letter of one Romanian NGO, previously specializing on promotion of bilateral economic and cultural relations between our two countries. They suggest to arrange a roundtable with widest possible participation of Romanian business and cultural circles to look for practical ways to get out of currently observed, currently stated, registered stalemate in our relations. I am sure that interested mass and social media people would be invited. You have to wait a little bit for further public announcement, and then maybe some ideas would be launched from the people directly concerned. As for getting rid of vassal dependence of neo-colonialist system imposed by former Western masters, it is much more challenging goal. And to a certain extent, in the international section of our briefing, this topic has been covered by me. But in fact, I do believe that it is impossible for a single, as it is formulated in some questions, political force or single political leader to effectively deal with such an existential challenge. It needs the will of majority of the Romanian people. It is my sincere belief after my relatively long stay in your country for over 7.5 years. To a great extent, I have already spoken about far-fetched, majorly demagogical and ungrounded accusations from Bucharest officials against Russia and champions of normal, if not traditionally friendly relations between our countries. Though I can tell you that not only against them such accusations are launched and used. allegations of the mentioned in one of the questions, Mr. Popescu from, I translate from back from English, and it was translation from Romanian National Communications Administration, something like that. His claims go in full conformity with the collective West approach to cyber or information high technology security agenda, which we see in the UN specialized committees authorized to work out relevant legally binding international convention. They blame their opponents of all unimaginable sins without bringing any documentary evidence, and at the same time ignoring, for example, already existing for about a decade, if I'm right, I'm right, with maybe some certain reservations. In OSCE, Organization for Cooperation and Security in Europe, there was established a network of so-called national contact points, exactly with the aim of mutual exchange of information and trying to deal with the cyber attacks, all kind of internet and other disasters and incidents. Mr. Popescu as if doesn't know about it. We have as well during my stay here. We have heard such accusations that hundreds, thousands of Russian attackers. If we move resolutely in that UN platform, on that UN platform, and adopt such a legally binding convention, criminalizing a set of actions and so on, we would make very substantial breakthrough towards cybersecurity in the general meaning of this formula. And evidently it won't eliminate cybercrime all in all, because till now, and I believe that for some period of time, if not forever, it would be impossible to catch by hand, red-handed. It is particularly difficult in computer cyberspace. Every hacker who would like to, I don't know, get some ransom money from some rich company in his opinion, and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, at the state level, we could arrange it. Mr. Popescu has no idea. What can we do? I'm just reminding him about existing. There is such national contact point in the Russian Federation, in the Russian Federation. And he can make use of it and inform about particular cases of computer cyber attacks or something, some troubles that they are facing. This is the solution. There is no other solution. In conclusion, I would quite consciously abstain from denominating most promising political forces and leaders as I've mentioned. I'm sure you'll excuse me, in particular, after a number of episodes we have already seen, from parliament, through press, and so on and so forth. What is shocking, I would say, that some of those reproaches of the radical, not to say extremist, Euro-Atlantic loyalists here, they sound like not a polemic expression or emotional accusation, but as an administrative order to be indisputably obeyed by the subordinates. This looks, to my mind, a little bit too much. Another set of questions, which is really interested and presented by In Prima Linea and vBlogger, about illegal capture of Russian hard currency assets, foreign assets, by the collective West. The most recent piece of news, nevertheless, says that European Union, for the time being at least, hasn't reached agreement on sequestering or confiscating those assets, and even for the formula presented recently, that means that calls for issuing special bonds and for the use of Russian assets as a guarantee money, financial guarantee for those bonds. They say that they haven't finally reached, for the moment at least, agreement on this subject. But nevertheless, I would like to say a couple of words on this subject. Some years ago, before 24th of February 2022, our finance minister, who remains in his post, Mr. Anton Silvanov, was pressed, not even addressed. He was pressed by the reporters, alarmist, vigilant reporters, journalists, with a question. Imagine that the West, now we call it collective West, will switch Russia off the SWIFT banking transfer system, arrest our assets, and so on. Mr. Silvanov, no, I can't believe it. It would be financial terrorism. So I share the view and the opinion of our minister expressed at that time. It is financial terrorism. Otherwise, what can I add to this subject? Russian government is resolute to pursue perpetrators of such terrorist activity, of such financial crimes in courts, and has already allocated money for these purposes. They say that fear of such lawsuits, they speak even that some such lawsuits have been already initiated. I haven't found first-hand information in this regard. Stopped European Union of blessing this beautiful idea of issuing bonds at the expense of Russia to help Ukraine in the sense of neo-Nazi and bloody regime there. On the other hand, Moscow has already announced officially on different quarters, on different occasions, that in case of confiscation of our sovereign assets, which are now found and localized in foreign, majorly Western banks, will lead to confiscation of our, in the territory of the Russian Federation, the assets of the Western origin, which are estimated by their total value as more or less compatible or comparable, better to say, maybe even larger than those roughly $300 billion of assets we were speaking about in connection with the gloomy intentions of the European Union. By the way, and it is as well an answer to one of the questions, investors from unfriendly countries who haven't given up in face of Washington, EU, and NATO coercion practices, who continue to operate in Russia, they are operating unimpeded. Their investments are facing no risks, believe me. But it depends on their, of course, position, their decision. Some of them suffer from really formidable pressures and all kind of, I would say, unfriendly attitude from the authorities, that not all of them are brave enough to stay in our country. Roughly, it is all, if I'm not mistaken, about today's agenda. If there are questions or maybe some specific issues you would like to raise, please. Ну, смотри, ты видишь, говори. Я уже... I'm losing my sight here gradually. This is the price of loan.
So we have three questions from Mr. Calistrata Tudorei, Forum of Non-Aligned Countries from Romania. The first question, what is the current status of the special military operation in Ukraine? Do you think the collective West still has the resources, financial, military, economic, to support this proxy attack against the Russian Federation?
Это все три вопроса или подряд? Первый вопрос. Okay, let us start step by step. It would be better. This is really a long story to be told. But the current status of special military operation is that Russian forces gradually, step by step, but almost on a daily basis, improve their positions along almost the whole front line, which is about 1,000 kilometers long. And in particular, in the northern sector, so-called Kupiansk sector, which is to be easier founded on the geographical map, is so-called Kharkov direction. And on Donetsk, which is located further to the south, in particular in Avdiivka, a town located only 10 kilometers from the major capital city of Donetsk, and which till quite recently was the major artillery and missile position to attack civilian targets, living quarters, marketplaces, bus stops, schools and kindergartens, higher education institutions in Donetsk, not to speak about stadiums, airport and other facilities that had been already destroyed. Что там, пропало случайно? Связь пропала у нас или нет? Есть? So you hear us. Could you give us a signal? It's okay with... And, okay. And what is the situation on the Ukrainian side of the front line? I believe that you are more or less informed. Though, of course, in a perverted light of Western mainstream propaganda, but nevertheless, even judging by the fact that American aid, including in the first place military aid, has been effectively suspended for the time being, European big package of $50 billion, if you look inside of it, you'll find that it is not so big, first of all. It is about 32 billion in credits and only the rest in loans, and so on and so forth. Till now, Western military industrial complex hasn't achieved the announced at certain period of time a goal of providing 1 million shells for Ukrainian army, and so on and so forth. In this regard, we believe that as far as, and I reiterate this point, as far as we are not fighting Ukrainian people, Ukraine as a country, we still believe that Ukrainians, they are misled, maybe losing the right path, but a brotherly nation. I've told you maybe already that my son-in-law is a Ukrainian, and my elder daughter and him, they have already 2 grandchildren of mine. and they're living peacefully. 7 million Ukrainians fled to the territory of the Russian Federation. They have chosen this way, not because the special forces of Ukraine prevented them from going westward, but because they knew that in the Russian Federation, millions of Ukrainians have been living in normal, equal with the other citizens' conditions for years, decades, and centuries. At least we have already more than 3 centuries now, 320 years, I believe, this year, or last year it was, of famous appeal of Hetman Bogdan Khmelnytsky for the Russian Tsar to accept, in modern terms, Ukraine. At that time, it was called Malorussia, into the big Russian state to find finally defense from the terror and atrocities of the Polish feudal authorities. So this is the situation. We are not going to hastily demolish any civilian targets to lose our heroic soldiers and officers in the hostilities. We are working patiently, and for those who are interested in history, though I don't want to dig too deep into history, because unfortunately I'm not a bad expert in history. So through the history, the quality which is now defined as strategic patience, or long will, sometimes it is called, long will for a long time, is characteristic of the Russian people and of the nations of the bigger Russia, which has been called differently through history. From Moscow Great Dukedom, Великое Княжество, which is not exactly Great Dukedom, it is something different, but this term could be through Moscow State, Russian Tsardom, then Russian Empire, and so on. So in this regard, I can't give you proper evaluation of eventually available resources of the West to feed this fratricide struggle in Ukraine, led and imposed on the Ukrainian nation by the neo-Nazi regime on behalf of the West. In principle, collective West has enormous potential in this regard. And the problem is that military-industrial complex in the United States, first of all, the major beneficiary of this conflict, as far as many military equipment and armaments from Eastern and even not Eastern Europe, but from other quarters of the world are now transferred to Kyiv because they are Soviet-made or produced on the basis, illegally produced on the basis former Soviet licenses, and are familiar for the Ukrainians and easier used by them. And all the new, or 2/3 at least, such statistics is available. 2/3 of new military orders for new equipment go to the United States of America. So, of course, they need time, they need investment, they need to pass through their own economic, social problems and challenges, which I have mentioned at the beginning of my briefing. From the statements of their leading politicians, recent statements of the politicians and military commanders, we see, as we have already discussed today, see their intention, rather resolute intention, to continue that war effort. What I can say? I can say that, not to repeat a famous phrase of our president, he has used it a couple of times. We hasn't even started. That means we haven't started any war. We are doing our military job in the form of special military operation. It is not a war. And our potential is enormously larger. But what would be the perspective? Perspective, unfortunately, and I have mentioned today, is rather gloomy because of the resolute decision like it looks now. Because when you look, for example, at the United States, they are divided on the problem, what are the priority points, priority addresses on their address book for military aid. Israel, Ukraine, southern border, southern Chinese Sea or Taiwan region or any. But nobody, in fact, with the exception of very rare persons, they are not really concerned about the true dangers that emerge from this escalation. And they are pursuing the course of escalation of military conflict in Ukraine. And as a result, encouragement, if you like, even encouragement, facilitating the way to larger conflict and to the Third World War, which is completely undesirable and is not pursued by the Russian leadership, Russian nation. Believe me, I am completely sincere telling you this. So, second question.
We have two more questions from Mr. Atudare. Both are related to BRICS. The first one, is BRICS preparing a common currency based on real assets, gold, silver, etc.? If so, when do you expect it to be released? And the second question, given that the existing major international organizations, United Nations, International Monetary Fund, World Trade Organization, seem to be rather subordinate to the collective West, are the BRICS states considering the creation of separate international organizations as an alternative to those led by the United States and its allies?
Well, about alternative currency of BRICS, it is not a secret that last year at the Johannesburg summit, besides the decision in favor of enlargement of the BRICS organization, if we can use it, because it is very informal organization. It has no status, it has no headquarters. So there was another decision taken. That the decision speaks about, if you like, command to the financial quarters of the BRICS member states to work out recommendations how to deal with all those elements of instability, unjust formulas of currency exchange, and so on and so forth. And in the next summit in Kazan in October, if I'm quite correct with my memory, such practical proposals should be prepared and presented to the leaders of now BRICS Plus structure. Is it about early introduction of new alternative currency? As far as I understand, it is not the case. It is about, like we have mentioned in our review, enlarging the sphere of payments and transfers in national currencies of the BRICS member states. It is about reinforcement of, that there is, I'm not quite sure for the correct name, but there is a new development or investment bank created by BRICS countries. That means enlargement of such financial structures to provide positive alternatives to International Monetary Fund. A World Trade Organization, if it is unblocked, you know that America has paralyzed all the effective activities of World Trade Organization, subverting the election of the arbitrage, I don't remember, tribunal it is called, the arbitrage division of this organization. So no serious conflicts could be settled on the basis of the rules of that World Trade Organization. If this process of operation of such an arbitrage mechanism would be unblocked and it will work effectively, we know that World Trade Organization has certain advantages and provides certain opportunities for global trade exchange, which we were witnessing for decades. It was not quite just, it was not quite fair in many cases. By now, there are complicating factors that should be taken into account, such, for example, factors as dumping by the West of all principles of fair competition, for example. They do not like your competitive qualities. They blow gas pipes which provide you with cheap gas. And your competitiveness blows up or goes down, whatever expression you like better. So, United Nations as well. It was Dag Hammarskjöld, the first or the second Secretary General of the United Nations, who said that United Nations organization was created not to bring the mankind into paradise, but to prevent the world to fall into the hell, you see? And this function, to a certain extent, it exercises in different fields. We can't say, the problem depends on the influence of the collective West in the United Nations. It is to a great extent inertia of the previous situation. It will need more, if you like, courageous, more self-conscious attitudes of many countries of medium and smaller size who are not supporting anti-Russian sanctions. Majority of the world hasn't supported anti-Russian sanctions of the collective West. But in many cases, they prefer not to oppose, because Americans in the first place and the European Union just openly, I would say arrogantly, press them, terrorize them, blackmail them, promising all kind of suffering, sanctions, and so on and so forth. And they prefer to abstain, to keep certain neutrality in such cases, and even sometimes vote together with the collective West on non-principal issues. This is the situation. That is why, for the moment, it is evidently, it would be premature, untimely for me to make any judgment. It looks like BRICS is evolving into a wider structure which gradually transforms into a center where very important good global dimension decisions or proposals are worked out, and the influence of such position of BRICS members is going to increase as far as we can see. On the other hand, we see the opposite trend in the world economy, which shows that super optimistic globalism has failed. And because of this, in fact, malicious, malignant, in this case, this term could be, and is quite rightfully fairly used, of the collective West with all its sanctions, limitations, restrictions, and so on and so forth. The global chains of production has been broken in many ways. More than that, military adventures, crises, wars, and conflicts, they add complications to the operation of that former global economy pattern or model. And that is why super regional, as they say sometimes, groupings are forming in different regions of the world. European Union is one of them. ASEAN, for example, remembered today, or Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or Euro-Asian Economic Union, which includes Russian Federation and a number of independent states which emerged in the former Soviet republics, and some other groupings. They need certain mechanism, certain intermediary, if you like, yes. And BRICS provides such a platform, because in BRICS we see rather good representation of major, most rapidly developing economic areas of the world. Eurasia in the first place, Africa, and Latin America as well. This could be the answer. As for the new currency guaranteed by gold, I don't know, diamonds, we have gold. Our gold reserves are not bad at all. We have good deposits of gold still to be extracted in different regions of our country, and so on and so on. But it is not the case. Economically, this idea hasn't yet matured enough. Please.
A question from Newsraw, Mrs. Luana Paveluca. What is your commentary about General Georgitsa Vlad's assessment about a war with Russia?
I believe that I have already answered this question. What could be added? I've told you that what Mr. Georgitsa said in his interview about the situation in Romania, it is a domestic affair of Romania. He proceeds from the assumption that somebody threatens Romania from outside, and rather transparently puts the finger on Russia. In this regard, I've told you that Russia doesn't pose any threat to Romania as far as it is about Romania. But as soon as Romania invites more and more foreign troops, declares itself irresistible and confident warrior of the collective West army, then of course some consequences should be previewed, and we have mentioned them in our review. We are openly speak about them, but in no way we are looking for any war. As for I don't know, Details, it is evidently not my job to comment them. Otherwise, what specifically have you found so interesting, so curious in Mr. Georgitsev's last interview? It was a regular interview. I brought a number of illustrations from Czechia, from God knows whom, Poland, Estonia, Lithuania, and others. All of them, they are now encouraged, if you like, by the military hysteria, if you like. They are pushed by their political leaders, bosses, ahead, and of course, they do their job as to the best of their knowledge and understanding of their functions and duties. But unfortunately, of course, in a wider vision of, for example, European security and stability architecture, it is activities detrimental to the real perspectives of consolidating this. But you know that it was a beautiful, detailed remark of our foreign minister. If I find literally the quotation, I'll try to do it. But I can retell you in major features what is it all about. It is about so-called island mentality of the United States of America. Yes, I'm lucky I found. Americans are very cynical people. I'm quoting Mr. Lavrov in one of his recent interviews. They have developed what is sometimes referred to as an island mentality, like Britain. The bulk of the settlers who moved to America were British. They eradicated the native tribes and forced the survivors into reservations. This island mentality is reinforced by the fact that no one around them poses serious security threats, except for the threats they create themselves. They have a sense that things are fine back home overseas, and they can take advantage of uncertain situations. So the plan is to create confusion and profit from it. It started in Vietnam, then there was some elaboration for other. The same goes for Ukraine. I believe that I can't claim to present this case better to you. Unfortunately, European countries whose economy has suffered really heavy blows as a result of this new military adventure of the United States, in which whole NATO has found to be involved in Ukraine, and whose competitiveness in the world markets is to a great extent suffers, if you like, great damages, huge damages, is playing the role of activist soliciting new and new, more and more military aid to the doomed for failure neo-Nazi regime in Kiev. By the way, our president has recently once more quite soberly, calmly explained that we are going to fight to eradicate neo-Nazism resolutely and finally, because our previous experience, I have mentioned some of the details of this previous experience, has brought us to this conviction. It should be done. Что еще? I believe so.
Добрый день. Позвольте мне задать вопрос тоже.
Пожалуйста, пожалуйста.
Валерий Иванович, поздравляю вас с наступающим Днем российского дипломата.
Спасибо.
Вопрос такой. На днях новый министр обороны Китая объявил, что Китай поддерживает Россию в украинском конфликте. Западные СМИ моментально отметили, что это было первое открытое публичное заявление Китая о поддержке России в украинском вопросе. Как вы считаете, какой это может иметь геополитический эффект на какую-то перспективу именно в контексте украинского конфликта? Спасибо.
Спасибо, хороший вопрос. Раз он задан по-русски, мы его ответим по-русски. Но если коротко, я надеюсь, что это заявление будет иметь прежде всего отрезвляющий эффект, sobering эффект. Переведи.
O întrebare de la vești din Rusia. Noul ministru al apărării al Republicii Populare Chineze recent în mod deschis a declarat că China susține Rusia în conflictul cu Ucraina. Și întrebarea domnului de la vești din Rusia este ce fel de efect în perspectivă, în viitor, va avea această declarație. Și în răspunsul său, la începutul răspunsului său, domnul ambasador a spus că speră că această declarație va avea un efect care va trezi comunitatea din Occident.
С самого начала, если мы вспомним, позиция Китая отличалась объективностью и конструктивизмом в отношении конфликта на Украине. И она основывалась на самом важном посыле о том, что прежде всего нужно понять причины возникновения этого конфликта и уже оценить, насколько оправданы действия сторон.
De la începutul conflictului, poziția Chinei a fost diferențiată adică susținută cu obiectivitate și constructivitate. Cum au declarat de nenumărate ori reprezentanții Chinei, trebuie să înțelegem la început motivele acestui conflict și după acesta putem să le evaluăm.
На Западе пошли совершенно другим путем. Они стали имитировать, то есть фальсифицировать, создавать видимость того, что они якобы вот тоже за справедливость, они защищают демократическую Украину, ставшую невинной жертвой агрессивной России.
Și Occidentul a început să imiteze, să falsifică sentimentele sale că ei încearcă să spunem, cumva să protejeze Ucraina, să apară principiile democratice a acestui statului mic.
Со стороны агрессивной, страшной России.
Da, din partea Rusiei mare și agresive.
Яркая иллюстрация этого подхода Запада – это так называемая Копенгагенская инициатива и формула мира Зеленского. Давай по порядку.
Unul dintre principalele exemple a acestei poziții Occidentului sunt așa numită inițiativă de la Copenhagen și formula păcii lui Zelenski. Așa numită, da.
Да, ну вот. Значит, если посмотреть на эту формулу мира, сформулированную уже больше года назад, в тот момент, когда Зеленский почувствовал, что, или вообразил, точнее, себе, что он может переломить ход боевых действий, представляет собой дикий набор хотелок неонацистов, которые культурным политическим языком называется безоговорочная капитуляция со стороны России.
Dacă ne uităm la această așa numită formulă păcii, putem să spunem că ea a apărut acum un an după ce Vladimir Zelensky și-a imaginat că are vreo succese pe câmpul de luptă și, de fapt, această formulă reprezintă un set sălbatic de dorințele acestui regimului neonazist de la Kiev.
Для того, чтобы создать видимость международной поддержки этой безумной формулы мира, которая является не формулой мира, а разновидностью совершенно неразумного ультиматума со стороны проигрывающей стране или стороне, побеждающей в конфликте, был создан так называемый Копенгагенский формат.
Pentru a susține această formulă păcii, așa numită, care reprezintă, de fapt, o capitulare totală a Rusiei sau ultimatul către Rusia pentru susținerea
со стороны проигрывающей стороне, выигрывающей в конфликте.
Un ultimatum de la o țară care pierde către o țară care câștigă. Pentru a susține această formulă a fost creată așa numit formatul de la Copenhagen.
Вначале их очень активно рекламировали, перечисляли, кто приехал. Потом постепенно стали скрывать, кто приехал, что сказал. Вот недавно, насколько я знаю, последнее такое мероприятие было в Давосе совсем недавно. Вот, а оно должно в итоге на высшей точке окончиться неким форумом мира, который утвердит формулу мира Зеленского. То есть вот это ультиматум.
La început, acest format de la Copenhagen a fost promovat, a avut foarte multă reclamă. Mai târziu, organizatorii acestui eveniment au început să ascundă tot ce este discutat acolo și cine vine pentru a participa la acest eveniment. Dacă nu mă amintesc, ultimul a fost la Davos și, cum înțelegem noi, toate aceste evenimente trebuie să ară o concluzie reprezentant într-un forum de pace la care va fi semnat un acord sau un fel de document care reprezintă formula păcii lui Zelensky.
Постепенно количество желающих участвовать в нем стало сокращаться. Хотя многие, в том числе солидные представители мирового большинства, продолжают участвовать на определенном не слишком высоком уровне.
Treptat, numărul participanților în aceste evenimente a început să se reducă, dar totuși reprezentanții țărilor, diferite țărilor, continuă să participe la aceste evenimente.
Мы хорошо осведомлены. Мы спрашивали представителей этих стран, многие из которых вполне дружественны нам и сотрудничают с нами. Вот. Зачем вы туда ездите? Ведь это же тупиковое направление. Они говорят, мы хотим послушать, что нам скажут, во-первых, да? Ну и во-вторых, подтвердить, что никакого мирного урегулирования без России, а формула мира не предполагает участия России. Она предполагает только подписание России безоговорочной капитуляции на условиях сумасшедшего нацистского режима. Вот, что без России никакого мира достичь нельзя.
Noi suntem informați despre aceste evenimente și despre participarea reprezentanților acestor țări, dintre care se află și țările prietenoase Rusiei, și acești reprezentanți ne-au răspuns că ei participă la aceste evenimente pentru că vor să ascultă declarațiile adresate acestor țări, dar au confirmat că aproape în fiecare eveniment ei, acești reprezentanți, declară că nicio pace nu este posibilă fără participarea Rusiei și în formula, așa numită formula păcii a lui Zelensky, nu conține nicio posibilitate de negocieri cu Rusia sau participarea Rusiei în această pace.
Что касается возвращаемся конкретно к Китаю. Что касается российско-китайских отношений в последний период, то они уже представляют собой достаточно плотное стратегическое, геополитическое взаимодействие, сотрудничество в целом ряде областей, в том числе военно-технической, проведение совместных маневров и так далее и тому подобное. Китайские товарищи, они более изобретательны на формулировке, и они придумали этому такую сложную какую-то формулу, типа углубленное стратегическое партнерство, не знающее прецедентов или что-то в таком духе. Я даже, вот извиняюсь, не смогу сходу ее воспроизвести. Вот, причем при ее характеристике отмечаю, что эти взаимоотношения выше и шире, чем отношения участников военно-политических союзов в периоды холодной войны, вот типа НАТО, например. Мы имеем у нас перед глазами такую иллюстрацию.
Ceea ce privește relațiile între Rusia și China, putem să spunem că avem cu această țară o colaborare strategică, geopolitică, inclusiv în diferite domenii, precum și domeniul politico-militar. Organizăm și exercițiile militare. Chinezii numesc această colaborare ca o parteneritate adâncă, strategică, care nu are într-o nouă epocă, care nu are niciun precedent înainte. Nu mă amintesc corect cum se numește, cum ei, chinezii, numesc această colaborare între țările noastre, dar ceva foarte așa frumos. Și putem să mai ne amintim că chinezii mai au declarat că această uniune militară și politică între țările noastre este mai profundă, mai serioasă decât colaborările, parteneriatele din timpul războiului rece în cadrul НАТО.
Как мне кажется, китайская страна и раньше это понимала, но вот конфликт на Украине окончательно привел ее к выводу о том, что Соединенные Штаты Америки во главе коллективного Запада ведут недружественную политику в отношении не только Китая, но и других стран, но и прежде всего Китая, поскольку даже само укрепление Китая, его развитие воспринимается как некая угроза Соединенными Штатами. Не как естественное развитие твоих конкурентов, с которыми ты готов конкурировать честно, а как угроза. Это, кстати, записано уже в решениях НАТО.
Partea chineză și înainte înțelegea acest lucru, dar astăzi înțelege și mai bine că Statele Unite și Occidentul condus de Statele Unite conduce o politică care pune în pericol țările noastre, inclusiv și China. Chiar toate succesele economice în China, Statele Unite consideră ca o pericol pentru ei.
Таким образом, сложилось вот такое неформальное, не оформленное в виде какого-то военного союза или какого-то договора геополитическое взаимодействие, если хотите, так сказать, взаимопомощь между нашими государствами, которое в значительной степени является одним из стержневых факторов и в рамках БРИКС, и в рамках вообще глобального баланса сил на нашей планете к настоящему времени.
Și această colaborare geopolitică sau, dacă doriți, un ajutor reciproc, care nu are niciun acord, adică nu există ca un acord între țările noastre, ne ajută să colaborăm fructuos și în reciproc, nu numai în cadrul BRICS, și în cadrul altor în cadrul altor organizații sau domenii care ne ajută să ne dezvoltăm și mai departe în lume.
Поэтому мы, исходя из интересов России, так же как Китай, исходя из своих интересов, открыты и практически развиваем взаимодействие, сотрудничество, партнерство в различных областях.
Și noi, pornind de interesele noastre, ca și China, care ia pași conform interesele sale, suntem deschiși pentru parteneriat și orice colaborare.
Мы исходим из того, что это и есть вот один из стержневых новых моментов, стержневых принципов новых будущего многополярного мира, который формируется объективно сейчас у нас на международной арене.
Și noi considerăm aceasta ca unul dintre principiile noi de bază de lumea multipolară, care astăzi se formează chiar în ochii noștri. Să vedem aceste schimbări.
Вот это примерно так коротенько. А в принципе, эта тема большая, поскольку это процесс, это не некое вот, если хотите, ликование, скажем, по поводу расширения БРИКС или чего-то другого. Это процесс, который потребует сознательных, осознанных, коллективных усилий большинства подлинно суверенных стран мира, к которым, несомненно, относятся Китай и Российская Федерация, Китайская Народная Республика и Российская Федерация.
Aceasta este pe scurt, dar trebuie să nu vă înțelegi că este un fel de fericire din cauza extinderii BRICS sau așa mai departe. Este un proces legat de eforturile țărilor, statelor într-adevăr suverane, precum China sau Rusia.
Ну вот я закончил ответ.
Terminat răspunsul meu.
Пожалуйста, давайте последний вопрос.
One last question. It's from Victor Vulpescu, a video blogger. He asks, what is, in Your Excellency's opinion, the key moments in history that led to the current rather precarious state of relations between Romania and Russia? And repeats his question about the opportunities for trade between our two countries.
Благодарю господина Лупеску. Это интересный вопрос, особенно то, что он настаивает на каком-то еще дополнительном ответе о нем, на него точнее, да? Переведи сразу, замучаешься.
Îi mulțumesc frumos domnului Vulpescu pentru întrebarea și pentru că insistă să primească un răspuns de la mine cu privire la această temă.
Я бы сказал, если в общем плане начнем, как положено, в теории, с теоретической части, в общем плане причинами или главной причиной ухудшения, резкого ухудшения сейчас наших двусторонних отношений российско-румынских является ход истории, в котором мы оказались по разную сторону от правды, как любят говорить наши американские bывшие партнеры. Да?
Aș vrea să încep cu o parte teoretică, pentru că în opinia mea, în general, primul motiv este că noi primul motiv primul motiv că noi suntem, Rusia și România, ne-am aflat în timpul mersului istoriei pe două părți diferite ale adevărului, cum îi place să spună foștii partenerilor noștri americani.
Очень коротко начиная с последних 1,5 десятилетий прошлого века, который остался в прошлом тысячелетии.
Foarte scurt, începând cu ultimele 15 ani de la secolul trecut.
После того, как Советский Союз, а затем это завершила полностью Российская Федерация, вывел все свои войска из Восточной Европы, заявил о том, что готов стать равноправным, уважаемым партнером с открытой душой, с открытой экономикой для ныне называемого коллективным Западом лагеря стран НАТО, что произошло?
După ce Uniunea Sovietică, apoi și Rusia și-au retras armata din Europa de Vest și când Rusia a declarat că dorește să... Da.
Хорошо.
Și după ce Rusia a declarat că dorește să devină partea acestei economii deschise,
Запад в ответ на возражение России против расширения НАТО, которое оказалось очень ему нужно после развала СССР, а до этого он говорил, что нет, НАТО, когда? Ни шагу за границу между ФРГ и ГДР, ни дюйма на восток. А тут оно ему оказалось. НАТО подписал с Россией некий фундаментальный акт, который оказался полным враньем вот на данный момент. Да? Давай, переводи.
da. După ce Rusia a protestat la declarațiile sau intențiile NATO de a nu se extindă spre vest, NATO a semnat un act fundamental cu Rusia care în sfârșit a devenit o mare minciună.
Российская Федерация с приходом к власти Владимира Путина в 2000 году раз от разу заявляла о своих добрых намерениях, о своей решимости участвовать в строительстве мирового порядка, основанного на справедливости, на безопасности, на стабильности, в том числе на сокращении вооружений и так далее и тому подобное.
De la începutul anilor 2000, după ce Vladimir Putin a devenit președinte al Rusiei, țara noastră a declarat de nenumărate ori despre pregătirea sa de a construi o nouă ordine împreună cu alte țări bazată pe respectarea reciprocă și cu alte, să spunem, condiții sau în alte domenii.
Быстро спускаемся на уровень двусторонних отношений. В 2003 году, после серьезной дипломатической работы между нашими странами, был подписан так называемый большой политический договор о дружественных отношениях и сотрудничестве, в котором написано все. Больше, чем почти 1,5 десятка статей, посвященных как раз в значительной степени экономическому сотрудничеству.
Și așa noi trecem treptat la relațiile bilaterale. În anul 2003, după o mare muncă și serioasă muncă diplomatică, a fost semnat un acord, un mare acord politic despre colaborarea și relațiile prietenoase între țările noastre, în care totul este scris, totul este numărat și scris, inclusiv și cu privire la relațiile economice.
И тогда уже было известно, что Румыния должна вступить в НАТО через год, там с небольшим, а после этого в Евросоюз тоже в ближайшей перспективе. И Россия не выдвигала никаких на этот счет возражений или там сетований.
Și chiar atunci a fost deja cunoscut faptul că România trebuia să adere la NATO și mai târziu la Uniunea Europeană și Rusia nu a protestat, nu a fost împotriva acestui fapt, să spunem.
Помните, 11 сентября 2001 года, да? начало глобальной войны против международного терроризма Россия предоставила Соединенным Штатам все невиданные ранее возможности для того, чтобы помочь им bороться с международным terrorismul, скажем, в Афганистане.
Și vă amintiți ce a fost în această perioadă? Am avut 11 septembrie în SUA. Rusia a declarat că este gata de a ajuta Statelor Unite ale Americii să luptă cu terorismul internațional. A permis să folosească Statele Unite și bazele de pe teritoriul Federației Ruse.
Но уже в 2007 году, когда Румыния уже вступила в НАТО, и вот-вот, по-моему, должна была вступить в Евросоюз в 2008 году она вступила, да? Вот, значит, Путин уже вынужден был в Мюнхене, я упоминал сегодня эту речь, сказать: друзья мои, мы готовы с открытой душой сотрудничать, строить справедливый мир, мирный, надежный, стабильный. Вот, но вы наши-то законные интересы намерены хотя бы уважать? Его за это уже сразу начали обвинять в агрессивности и бог знает в чем.
Deja în anul 2007, înainte aderării României la Uniunea Europeană, Vladimir Putin a vorbit la conferința de la München, am astăzi deja vorbit despre această conferință, și a declarat că Rusia este gata să colaboreze cu sufletul deschis cu toate țările. Dar întrebarea este: oare aceste țări sunt pregătite să consideră și interesele suverane noastre? Și după acest discurs, Vladimir Putin a fost convins de diferite chestii, să spunem. De agresiune, да, de agresivitate.
De agresivitate, по крайней мере, да. При этом параллельно Румыния начала резко терять всякий суверенитет и независимость внешнеполитических решений, став членом НАТО.
Și după ce România a devenit membru NATO, ea a început să-și pierde și suveranitatea și posibilitatea de a lua decizii proprii.
В 2008 году на саммите НАТО в Бухаресте Украине, Грузии была обозначена перспектива членства в НАТО.
La summitul NATO de la București în anul 2008, Ucraina și Georgia au primit un fel de permisiune, de perspectivă de aderare la NATO.
И уже в том же году, кстати, между прочим, это год, когда у власти был президент Дмитрий Анатольевич Медведев. На Западе все боятся Путина. Тогда был президентом Дмитрий Анатольевич Медведев. И марионетка Соединенных Штатов, Мишико Саакашвили, грузинский президент, устраивает военную провокацию в Южной Осетии, когда были убиты в некотором количестве, в том числе российские миротворцы, осуществлявшие там законную, международно обоснованную миссию, основанную на международном соглашении.
În anul 2008, președintele Rusiei a fost Dmitri Medvedev și nu Vladimir Putin, de care toată lumea este frică. Dmitri Medvedev a fost președinte și marioneta Statelor Unite din Georgia, Mikhail Saakashvili, a organizat un război, un conflict în Osetia, un conflict înarmat în Osetia de Sud, și ca rezultat, ca urmare a acestui conflict, au murit și militarii ruși de pace, făcători de pace. Da, în Osetia de Sud.
А дальше понеслось-поехало. Где-то в году там 10-м, но не позже 12-го, подписывается соглашение о строительстве на территории Румынии базы стратегической противоракетной обороны Соединенных Штатов Америки в Девисеу.
Și în anii 2010, sau dacă nu mă greșesc, nu mai târziu decât 2012, este semnat acordul cu privire la construirea pe teritoriul României a bazei de apărare antiaeriană americană, de sistemul de această apărare antiaeriană la DVS-ul.
Стратегической противоракетной обороны, не противовоздушной обороны. Поправь, пожалуйста, это существенно.
De sistemul de apărare strategică antirachetă, da, la DVS-ul.
Почему это такое важное значение имеет? Потому что Россия, как мы уже сегодня с вами констатировали, это огромная страна. Защищать ее территорию крайне сложно. Вот. И с начала ядерной эры, еще в конце 40-х годов прошлого века, постепенно пришли к пониманию, что настоящая стабильность должна базироваться на двух основах. На более-менее равном атакующем потенциале и более-менее равном возможности защищаться от ядерной атаки.
De ce acest lucru este important pentru Rusia? Pentru că Rusia este o țară mare și de la sfârșitul anilor 40, secolului trecut, a fost păstrat în lume principiul că totul este bazat pe principiile egalității potențialelor celor care atacă și celor care se apără de aceste atacuri.
Американцы в 2002 году вышли из этого договора и стали разворачивать сеть своих баз по всему mиру, чтобы окружить Россию.
Americanii au ieșit din acest acord în anul 2002 și au început să construiască bazele americane în toată lumea au început să construiască aceste baze în jurul Rusiei.
Ну и дальше в том же духе, дорогие друзья. Вот в том же духе. Ничего со стороны. Начали принимать антироссийские санкции, Румыния их поддерживала. Со времен Крыма, где произошел демократический референдум, некоторые румыны мне говорят, там не было международных наблюдателей. Там были международные наблюдатели. Только эти международные наблюдатели были не отобранные депутаты Европейского парламента своими национальными разведками или уже проверенные русофобы, а независимые наблюдатели. Они прекрасно видели мирный характер референдума в Крыму. Но, тем не менее, мяч уже, или шар, или камень, глыба покатилась вниз с горы.
Apoi au început să se introducă și sancțiunile antiruse și România a susținut aceste sancțiuni. Totul a început și de la timpul chestii de Crimeei. Acolo a fost organizat un referendum democratic. Aici, în România, unii ne spun că acolo, în timpul referendumului, nu au participat observatori internaționali. Eu pot să vă spun că ei au fost acolo, acești observatori internaționali, dar ei nu au fost membri Parlamentului European sau alte persoanele care au fost aleși de serviciile speciale de securitate. Ei au fost observatori independenți, inclusiv și deputații de la unele parlamentele.
Ну, параллельно с 2014 года на Восточной Украине активизировался, и вошел в активную фазу геноцид русскоязычного и русского населения, который в Румынии предпочитали не замечать. Так же, как ОБСЕ тогда определяла по ветру так. Прилетело. Такой-то снаряд. Откуда? Не знаем. Снаряд прилетел на очередной рынок или в очередную школу. Да.
Începând de la anul 2014 s-a activizat și genocidul populației ruse sau vorbitoare de limbă rusă în Ucraina și nimeni, inclusiv OSCE, nu a observat, să spunem, nimic periculos atunci. Au spus, da, a avut loc atacuri cu obuze, dar nu știm exact de unde au venit aceste atacuri.
Пропуская множество этапов типа Минских соглашений, предположим, и прочее, прочее, которые сами западные лидеры, подписавшие их, признали сознательной уловкой, чтобы выиграть время, чтобы вооружить Украину для войны с Россией. Пропуская эти многие вещи, перейдем к следующему этапу.
Și nu mai vorbesc și despre acordurile de la Minsk, care, cum au declarat și liderii de la Occident, că aceste acorduri au fost semnate doar pentru a câștiga puțin timp Ucrainei și pentru a înarma această țară.
Началась специальная военная операция. Румыния первой бросилась доказывать, что это агрессия. Румыния с пеной у рта, я не буду называть имен, но все знают, кто с пеной у рта, возмущался варварской расправой над населением Бучи, обвиняя Россию в военных преступлениях, грозя трибуналами и так далее.
După ce a început operațiunea militară specială în Ucraina, România a fost între primele țări care a numit această operațiune ca agresiune și cu, să spunem, spumă în gură a început să dă vină pe Rusia, inclusiv putem să ne amintim și incidentul de la Bucea. Nu vreau să vorbesc cine exact, dar ei au dat vină pe Rusia direct, fără nicio investigație.
Грозя военными трибуналами, наказанием за воображаемые военные преступления.
Permitând să inițieze la tribunale internaționale legate de crimele de război și așa mai departe.
Никаких доказательств, в том числе элементарного списка тех якобы убитых русскими людей, которые были разложены по сторонам дороги, ведущим в этот пригород Киева, и тогда не было.
Nu a fost nicio dovadă nici atunci, nici acum. Chiar nu au reușit să ne dea cel puțin o listă de oameni care, după spusele lor, a fost ucise de militarii ruși.
Сейчас вот, в самое последнее время, глава украинской делегации на мирных переговорах в Стамбуле Арахами рассказал, что да, вот мы так готовы были подписать мир, ничего бы этого не было в апреле 2022 года, когда специальная военная операция была на самом начальном этапе. Вот. А русские в качестве жеста доброй воли отвели свои войска от Киева и из некоторых других территорий.
Liderul, șeful delegației ucrainene de pace de la Istanbul, Arahami, chiar în aprilie 2022, a declarat că delegația ucraineană și cea rusească au fost gata să încheie acest armistițiu sau un acord de pace și rușii chiar și-au retras armata de la regiunea Kiev și de la capitala ucraineană.
Да. Если бы этот мирный договор был введен в действие, ничего бы не было вот последующих страшных осады Мариуполя, Бахмута и так далее и тому подобное. Ничего бы не было, ни сотен тысяч жертв, ничего.
Dar acest acord de pace nu a fost semnat și dacă acest acord ar fi fost semnat, nu ar fi fost nimic rău dintre tot ce a avut loc apoi, asediurile Mariupol sau Bahmut și așa mai departe.
Но выдающийся румынский дипломат, который сейчас выбран в состав Международного суда ООН, с пеной у рта по поводу и без повода доказывал, что в Буче были совершены страшные злодеяния русскими варварами, оккупантами и так далее и тому подобное. И грозил вот этой вот расправой, трибуналом и так далее. А фактов не было тогда и нет сейчас. И не будет. Потому что это все придумала британская разведка. и пиар-агентство совместно с ЦИПСО, так называемым украинским отделом по проведению специальных психологических информационных операций.
Un diplomat de excelență, un diplomat de excelență al României, care astăzi ocupă un loc la
Членом Международного суда International Court of Justice.
la Curtea Internațională,
The Hague.
da, la Haga, care astăzi ocupă acest loc, un diplomat român de excelență, el atunci cu spumă în gură a pus vină pe Rusie pentru acest să spunem, incident din Bucea, fără nicio dovadă, și a promis Rusiei și tribunal și așa mai departe. Dar pot să vă spun că totul de la Bucea a fost organizat de agențiile PR din Ucraina și Marea Britanie.
Да. Ну и дальше из той же оперы все продолжается. Теперь вот Румыния гордится тем, что будет или уже начала обучать украинских летчиков летать на F-16, которые способны, кстати, быть носителями не только дальнобойных достаточно ракет, действующих до 500 километров, но и ядерного оружия.
România a declarat că va antrena sau poate deja antrenează piloții ucraineni de avioane de luptă F-16, care, trebuie să menționez acest lucru, sunt capabili să ducă rachetele de rază lungă până la 500 km și rachetele nucleare.
Да. Так что, мне кажется, я достаточно полно ответил на ваш вопрос. Какие исторические события, точнее их цепь, привели к нынешнему плачевному состоянию наших отношений, и я бы хотел услышать хотя бы одно слово упрека в адрес России, что она что-то не так сделала, что-то не договорила, не предложила или что-то просаботировала. Я, приехав сюда в 2016 году, бился, не мог собрать даже межправительственную комиссию по торгово-экономическому и научно-техническому сотрудничеству. Просто собраться после нескольких лет перерыва, чтобы обсудить, что можно сделать.
Cred că mi se pare că răspunsul meu a fost destul de complet despre momentele istorice sau un rând de momente istorice care au adus la starea actuală a relațiilor bilaterale. Dar orice persoană poate să spună, să ne acuză că Rusia nu a spus destul sau a sabotat ceva. De fapt, nimeni nu poate spune așa ceva, pentru că eu, când am ajuns aici, am sosit în România în anul 2016, am încercat de multe ori să fac ceva și chiar n-am reușit să organizez ședință de Comisia interguvernamentală română-rusă care se ocupă cu problemele economice, tehnice și științifice. N-am reușit să organizez acest.
И еще для полной радости, вот это хорошо перевели, для полной радости и удовлетворения партнеров, румынская сторона вплоть до совсем недавнего времени периодически вытаскивает из нафталина дохлую кошку, как сказали бы в Англии, или мои палестинские друзья бывшие.
Și pentru fericire sau satisfacția completă a partenerilor, pot să adaug că partenerii noștri români, foștii partenerii noștri români, continuă să scoată, cum se spune la noi, o pisică moartă de la naftalină.
Да, ну что значит для мной? Мои, как говорят в Великобритании, или мои бывшие палестинские друзья любили это выражение?
Cum se spune și în Marea Britanie sau cum au spus prietenii mei de la Palestina?
Это вопрос о некоем золоте, которое Россия должна вернуть Румынии.
Este o problemă a unui tezaur de aur care este, cum spun ei, Rusia trebuie să se returneze României.
Напомню о другом историческом событии в этой связи и закончим эту тему. Леонид Ильич Брежнев сказал товарищу Николаю Чаушеску в 1960 каком-то 7-8 году, в 60-е годы прошлого века, больше полувека назад или около полувека назад, скажу вам по-товарищески, как коммунист коммунисту, товарищ Чаушеску, забудьте об этом. Смысл был такой, что Румыния, Россия по совокупности собственных деяний, есть такая формулировка в юриспруденции, в Уголовном кодексе, по совокупности деяний, должна намного больше. Забудьте об этом и радуйтесь этому. Все, я все сказал.
Cu privire la această temă, vreau să spun doar un singur lucru și terminăm cu această întrebare. Despre tezaur, Leonid Ilici Brejnev a spus lui Nicolae Ceaușescu, da, toată lumea știe, este secretarul general a Partidului Comunist din Uniunea Sovietică. El, Leonid Brejnev, a spus lui Nicolae Ceaușescu în anii 60, secretarul general sau primul secretar, nu mă amintesc corect, al Partidului Comunist din România, că eu, cum a spus Leonid Brejnev, trebuie să vă spun că tovarășului, ca comunist comunistului, că trebuie să uitați de acest lucru. Trebuie să uitați de tezaur. Pentru că cum a fost și scris în documentele juridice, după, ca rezultat de tuturor activităților României, să spunem așa, ei, juriștii, au un fel de formula în documentele sale, România sau responsabilitatea totală a României sau vină totală a României, România are o datorie mai mare către Rusie decât Rusia către România. Dar nu ne trebuie această datorie de la voi.
Нет, я не сказал прощаем. Мы не требуем. Нет, мы прощаем.
Dar vă iertăm, să spunem așa. Vă iertăm pentru această datorie.
А в остальном, что я могу сказать? Наши страны остаются близкими соседями, и объективно у нас есть все возможности для восстановления нормальных отношений. Но все остальное уже сказано, думаю, не стоит повторять. От кого это зависит?
Dar trebuie să adaug în sfârșit că noi rămânem țările vecine și avem toate posibilitățile de a restabili relațiile noastre bilaterale. Și restul rămâne, adică totul este legat de deciziile oamenii responsabili.
Так, мы исчерпали нашу повестку дня.
Dacă nu mai aveți întrebări sau dacă aveți întrebări, apăsați pe butonul Raise the Hand și vă dăm cuvântul. Dacă nu, putem...
One hand. Not raise the hands. But I am joking.
Dacă nu mai aveți întrebări, vă mulțumim frumos pentru atenție.
Благодарю вас всех. Спасибо за внимание. Желаю вам успехов в вашей непростой журналистской доле в современном коллективном Западе. Вот сейчас Такер Карлсон в Москву приехал. Вы наверняка слышали, как ему достается от totalitarной демократии.
Și vă mulțumesc frumos pentru atenție și vă doresc succese în activitatea dumneavoastră de jurnaliști. După cum știți, că Tucker Carlson a ajuns la Moscova pentru a lua interviul de la domnul Vladimir Putin și vedeți cum este criticat de la o țară democratică.
Критикат. Как ему достается how he is punished by the totalitarian democracy in the collective West states. Ok, они поняли.
Да.
Они поняли, они же журналисты, я сам учился на журналиста, должны быть сообразительны. Ну, переведи.
Excelența sa spune că jurnaliștii sunt oameni deștepți și trebuie să înțeleagă tot, pentru că și domnul ambasador a absolvit facultatea de jurnalism internațional și el înțelege și el a fost învățat așa.
Благодарю вас, до свидания.
Vă mulțumesc frumos.
Mulțumesc.